What's that?
New cinematographer today.
It's going. Yeah. We'll find out.
I think it's going. Yeah.
Quickly.
No, it's going.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. The spiritual that came about at the time of slavery, I first really became acquainted with the song when Mary Travers sang it in the mid-60s of Peter, Paul, and Mary fame. And even though it was sung in a minor key, and probably because it was sung in a minor key, it had a major impact on me. Not on me myself personally, but on how I felt for my mother. My mother had a contentious relationship with her mother, my grandmother, for all my life that I was aware of. And it all came about because of her parents divorcing relatively early. She had a brother that was a couple of years younger than her, and my grandfather, whom I never met, was an alcoholic. And after, 5, 7, 8 years, she said, I've had enough of this, you know what. And she divorced him. And she never had anything good to say about men or marriage after that. In fact, all my life, all she could talk about is, men are nothing but GD, snakes in the grass, and everything that goes along with that. So she had to go to work to support 2 kids. My grandfather took off for California, and she went to work at the Fisher Body Fleetwood plant, which is on 4th Street. They had Cadillac Motors. They made V8 and V12 motors there and bodies there. And she became a seamstress. And she sewed seat covers for Cadillac cars. And she lived in Detroit, right on the border of Lincoln Park, and just a couple of blocks from 4th Street. So she never drove in her life and never did the rest of her life till she died at 96. So she'd hop the bus, the 4th Street line, and just take the bus down to Fleetwood Motors, which was on 4th Street, and come back. And finally, having 2 kids got to be too much for her. And she said, we've got to focus on your brother and on his well-being. And she had a childless aunt and her husband who lived in South Bend. The whole family were Hungarian Catholics that had come over from Hungary and settled in South Bend, as did a lot of Hungarians. And so she sent my mother packing on a bus to South Bend from the age of 12 till she graduated from high school at the age of 16. And she lived with her childless aunt and her husband. And my mother was really quite a personable woman and extremely intelligent. She had skipped a grade along the way and graduated from Central High School near the top of her class. And in fact, in their student newspaper, just 2 months before they graduated, they had a little column there, and I still have a clipping of it in the book inside. And it's 10 questions that graduating seniors want to know before they graduate. Answers to these questions, if at all possible. And one of them is, what makes Rose Horvath so smart? And that was my mother. And the week after she graduated, she was put on a bus and sent back to Detroit. And within a couple of weeks, she had a job working for a dentist down in downtown Detroit. And she too rode the 4th Street line bus all the way down to downtown while Grandma got off at Fleetwood. And my mother did not know, because of her father leaving and because of the way my grandmother felt about men and about marriage, my mother did not have the benefit of a whole lot of love. And likewise, my mother, she was a good mother. I mean, she was a great cook and kept us well fed and well clean, but my mother didn't know how to give love. She didn't know how to say, I love you. In fact, I don't remember her ever saying that till I was in my 50s. She wasn't touchy-feely. She didn't know how to give hugs. That wasn't her. Not that she didn't care about my sister and I, but it just wasn't her to be expressive at all, emotive about how she felt. And we definitely, my sister and I, missed out on that. And I remember my mom, she and I used to play a lot of double solitaire. We'd sit at the dining room table and play double solitaire. And I remember the mail coming one afternoon, and she went and got it, and she came and sat down, and there was a letter from California, and she opened it up, and she had a look on her face that I couldn't interpret, but there were no tears or anything. And I said, what is it, Mom? And she said, oh, it's a letter telling me that my father was found on the streets of one of the big cities in a Skid Row, that they'd found his body. He was dead. And we went on playing double solitaire because it just didn't mean a whole lot. If it did, she didn't show it. So, my dad's mother, my grandmother on his side, she was just the opposite of my grandmother and my mother. She was a big, buxom woman, and she loved to just grab you and hug you and put her chest into you. And, I love you, Gary, I love you so much, and sit on her lap. And she introduced me to coffee at 7 years of age, and she introduced me how to make Dunkers, donuts, swimming around in lard and put all kinds of leather, all kinds of topping on them. And she was just the opposite. And when she died when I was 14, my world was like crushed, because my father, you would think that my father would have inherited some of his mother's stuff. And my father, when I turned 5 years of age, he stopped kissing me and hugging me for fear that it might make me queer. Speak the truth. And I didn't get a kiss and a hug, quite unexpectedly, till he and I were bear hunting way up above Minnesota, about 1,200 miles from here, when I was 23, and I happened to shoot a bear. And he was just so damn excited. He real quick gave me a hug and a kiss, and I couldn't believe it, because that's something that he didn't do with me. So, I grew up with these influences, and I swore that if I got married and if I had children, I was never going to do that to them. I was going to tell them I loved them as often as I could. I was going to kiss them as often as I could, because I hadn't gotten it. My sister hadn't gotten it. And I saw the problems that it created in me. So when I took my girlfriend, who I had first started dating in senior prom, and then we went together 4 years in college, and we got engaged. And it was time to go over to my grandmother's house, my mother's mother, and tell Grandma that we got engaged. And we had been putting it off because my fiance knew all about my grandma and her reaction when my dad had walked in the house to ask for my mother's hand, years before. My grandmother had attacked him with a butcher knife. Literally had attacked him with a butcher knife, tried to kill him. And he ran out of the house. And because she hated men and she hated the institution of marriage, because all men do is do you dirty. That's it. And that was her attitude. So my fiance was shaking, quivering. Gary, do we have to do this? Yeah, we got to tell Grandma. So we go over to her house. She just lived a couple of blocks from us by this time, back in Allen Park. And we walked in there, and I'm, Grandma, we got engaged. And my grandmother loved my fiance. I mean, she really did. But when I told her that we had gotten engaged, she goes, oh, Gary, what have you gone and done? No. At least she didn't attack my fiance. So this is what I was walking into with my mother's side of the family, and my dad. So when our son, my first wife and I had a boy, and my second wife and I had a boy, and when we had our first son, I was busy building a veterinary clinic. I wasn't home a whole lot because we were worried about where was the money going to come from. We've got to pay attention to the animals and the clients, and you got to be at the clinic all the time. So I was really envious. I was jealous of my wife, actually, that she got to care for our son, do the caregiving. And one summer we were both really active in our Presbyterian church, and one summer she was helping to lead a week-long church Bible school. And I was really envious and jealous because, number one, I wanted to go into ministry, get out of veterinary medicine. Here it was, she was going to spend a whole week at the church. And our son was going to be there involved with all these other kids, which I loved working with kids. And, but I got to tell you got to be careful what you ask for, because you might get it. And when my second son came along, when he was in 5th grade, he and his best friend decided to do something really, really stupid. And little did I know then, but I was going to get my chance to mother him almost completely for the next 5 months. Because we were called down to the school, and they said they had scheduled a meeting with the entire Board of Education, and my wife and I and our son would have to appear, and this other kid would have to appear with his parents to argue our case for why they shouldn't suspend him, at least for a few days and possibly for the rest of the school year. And I remember going to that meeting in Clawson that night, and here's like 12, 15 members of the school board, and my wife and I and our son, and it was tense, and they asked some pretty pointed questions, and we were very candid and very honest, and we pleaded, look, just give them, a week or 2 weeks, don't kick them out for the rest of the year. And later on that night, the superintendent called us and said, well, they voted to kick them out for the rest of the year. So the next day I met with her, and being a veterinarian and having my own place, I could take time off, and I met with her, and she gave me a program that they worked with, an online program, and she said, here's who you contact there. And we got all the books sent to my house here, and for the next 5 months, fortunately, I was only working half days then. The economy had gone south a couple of years before that, so we had closed down to half days. Plus, I just wanted more time off to do stuff, as a Dharma teacher and as a monk. So I would go over to her house, pick Kai up every morning, and take him to the clinic with me, get him going on his book work, but he'd take breaks and he'd help me clean up cages or do whatever we had to do, and he learned a lot about veterinary medicine that 5 months. And then we'd come home here, and I'd make lunch for both of us. And then from 1 until 3:30, it was hit the books, and go over everything with them. And I learned a lot being away from school. I really learned a lot of things that I may have learned at one time and had forgotten, or maybe I never learned them. But I actually enjoyed the educational process that we went through. And then he had to call his teacher, his online teacher, before 4 o'clock every day, and give her an update of how things had gone that day. So the end of his elementary education ended here. So I had my chance to be not only father, but to be mother too. And I got to be honest with you, although I felt bad for him that he was suspended from school and some of the stuff that kids later said, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was hard work. And I got to tell you something. I fully realized then motherhood is hard work. It is really hard work. Being a full-time mother, like my mother was, must have been hard work. But being a mother and working simultaneously, I can't imagine it. I mean, I would have died after another 6 months of doing what I did. As much as I loved it, I would have died. I mean, it was tiring. I was exhausted all the time. So I thought, you know what? Today's Mother's Day. You know, what a great day to talk a little bit about Avalokiteshvara. You know, the Bodhisattva of compassion. To suffer with others, as uncomfortable as that can be. You know, Avalokiteshvara was first mentioned in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, which was actually written in bits and pieces before the Lotus Sutra. And the Lotus Sutra is one of the earliest Mahayana sutras. But he wasn't really explained a whole lot, just mentioned. Whereas in the Lotus Sutra, chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, expounds on who Avalokiteshvara is and what he does. And I say he because Avalokiteshvara is a Sanskrit word that ends in A, which means it's masculine. Anything that ends in I, E, like Manjushri, the Bodhisattva wisdom, is typically feminine. And yet most people nowadays, things have switched. Manjushri is considered a male, and Avalokiteshvara is considered a female. And it all happened in China. When Avalokiteshvara went up into China, for whatever reason, the Chinese made him her. And Avalokiteshvara became feminine. In fact, that is a Chinese right there, Avalokiteshvara, standing over there on our side altar. And Guan Yin was her name. East Asian Buddhism, unlike Indian Buddhism, who kept him male, East Asian Buddhism, most of East Asian Buddhism nowadays, sees Avalokiteshvara as feminine. And Guan Yin in China, in our Korea, Quan Am, in Vietnam, Quan Am, and in Japan, Canon is a real popular name. Also, there's another Kwansayam or something like that. Anyhow, Canon is the most common. And in fact, Canon Camera Company got their name from the Bodhisattva of Compassion, except they spelled it differently. C-A-N-O-N instead of K-A-N-N-O-N. Well, interestingly enough, in Theravada Buddhism, there is only one Mahayana Bodhisattva who is revered, who is venerated, and it is Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of Compassion. And they call him, they still use him, Lokeshvara. Lokeshvara is our Quan Am. So I want to read you from the Lotus Sutra, and I'm not going to read a whole lot of chapter 25. I just want to read you a basic here. So put your hands in Gasho or Hapchong, if you would, please. The cry regarder is he who hears the cries of the world, or she nowadays. The cry regarder, with his mystic wisdom, can save a suffering world. Perfect in supernatural powers, widely practiced in wisdom and tact. In the lands of the universe, there is no place where he does not manifest himself. All the evil states of existence, hells, ghosts, animals, sorrows of birth, age, disease, death, all by degrees are ended by him. His vow is vast and deep as the sea, inconceivable in its eons. Serving many thousands of Buddhas, he has vowed a great pure vow. He who hears his name and sees him, and bears him unremittingly in mind, calling upon him in time of trouble, will be able to end his sorrows of existence. End of the reading. So, in Tibetan Buddhism, by the way, one of the avatars, if you will, of Avalokiteshvara is Tara, and especially green Tara. And Tara literally means the mother who gives birth to Buddhas of the three times. So the main practice in Tibetan Buddhism is working the prayer beads, as some of us, I don't know if you don't have any yet, do you?
I don't have.
No, I'm looking at Tara. Okay. Working the prayer beads while chanting Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. And, or working the prayer wheel while chanting that. But the main practice of lay people and monks in Tibetan Buddhism is working the prayer beads while chanting the chant of Avalokiteshvara. This is supposedly Avalokiteshvara chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the lotus. Hallelujah. Amen. So, the main, in East Asian Buddhism, the Buddhism of China, Korea, Vietnam, Japan, and Taiwan, East Asian Buddhism, it's a real common practice for Om Mani Padme Hum too, working prayer beads, as we have done here on Thursday nights. And the other thing that's really popular, especially in Korean Buddhism, is the Great Dharani, the Great Compassion Dharani, chanting that. And so, one of the things that I began, because of the fact that Avalokiteshvara and has been, because of the Silk Road that goes from the Near East to the Far East, and the interconnection of Christianity and Buddhism, and as they mix along there over the centuries, Kwanum, Avalokiteshvara, became like Mother Mary. And like Mother Mary, mother and child, oftentimes you'll see Kwanum with holding a child. And in fact, Kwanum especially usually has a Buddha right up in the headdress right there. And that one does too. If you go up there afterwards, you'll see a small Buddha. And anytime you see a statue and you're unsure of what it is, look in the headdress and see if there's a sitting Buddha there, or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. If there is, that's an Avalokiteshvara statue. So, and having studied in Catholic seminary years ago for a couple of years, and having been drawn to the Ave Maria, the Hail Mary, and using it still in my private practice, I switched it over a couple of years ago, and as Yambul knows, because she's been here with me on Thursday nights, and we chant, working the beads, the Hail Kwanum. So, put your hands in Hapchon or Gasho if you would, and just listen as we close this Dharma talk out. Hail Kwanum, full of mercy, Buddha is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst bodhisattvas, and blessed be the fruit of thy womb, Shakyamuni. Holy Kwanum, mother of compassion, be with us now and at the hour of our death. Amen.